Our next discussion is going to be on the state of North Carolina's water. Please welcome Daniel Smith, the Director of the Division of Water Resources, Jim Spangler, the President of Spangler Environmental, and Stanford Baird, a partner at K&L Gates. Gentlemen, take it away.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate that. And thanks to the Chamber and all the sponsors of the this annual conference. It's great that we can continue to have this conference and get folks together on Zoom and virtually, even if we can't be there together in person. We missed a lot of the good networking that goes on during this conference every year. But hopefully, vaccine and Lord willing, we can be doing that next February. So I'm joined by, I'm Stanford Baird. I'm a partner with K&L Gates here in the Raleigh office and practice environmental law. Very glad to be on the same panel here with Danny Smith, a 28-year or 29-year veteran of DEQ and its predecessor agencies, the Division Director of the Division of Water Resources. And most folks in the audience should know Jim Spangler, the founding partner, and he's the Spangler behind Spangler Environmental. And Jim, thanks for being part of this as well. We want to spend a few moments talking about the Division of Water Resources generally and hear from Danny, who is, of course, is our featured guest today. And then we have a couple of specific topics we want to discuss, and then perhaps there may be time for questions as well. So if you, members of the audience, please put questions in the Q&A, not in the chat, but in the Q&A, and we'll try to get to those at the end. And if we're not able to, Danny and Jim have agreed with me to go to the lounge in the platform, the conference platform, and be available to field additional questions there afterwards. So just wanted to mention that as well. So Mr. Smith, Danny Smith, you have been on the job as division director for just over 1 year now. If memory serves, you took over the division back on February 1st of 2020. The division at that time had lost some strong leadership, folks who were very experienced. Linda Culpepper and Jim Gregson retired both around that time, I believe. And so if you could, Danny, give us a little bit of a look back over your first year as division director, some thoughts about priorities and initiatives that the division currently has on its desk.
Okay, and I'll push forward a little bit with this so we can catch up. But yes, yeah, I mentioned. So we started off with Linda Culpepper retiring and Jim Gregson also retiring, the deputy director. Since then, I've come on board and we've got Julie Gribb as a deputy director. Very excited that she's on board with us. She's come with a strong MPDS wastewater background in both industrial and municipal permitting. So it's very good to have her with us. As far as, obviously looking back, as a big challenge to everybody has been the COVID issue and responding to that. I know all the supervisors and managers want their staff safe and want to know how to be safe. And so part of our big initiative is trying to get people working remotely as much as possible and respond to that. But we are still doing inspections and responding to complaints and fish kills and doing compliance work as appropriate. Where the lab is analyzing samples, and we're still doing stream assessments and lake assessment work as well. So I'm really proud of the staff of how they've responded. And we certainly have been able to continue the EMC and commission meetings and public meetings and public hearings. So it's just, we just need to continue to be safe and push through this issue. One of them, I'm going to shift over to initiatives and priorities. And just as a general, from a manager standpoint, I'm a big proponent, and I have been since my work in the regional offices, about making certain that we work on consistency and having I've been putting staff in positions to advance and be very knowledgeable, get a lot, as much as they can out of their position. It's important that we get folks in a place where they can pursue their career in an advanced way. So I'm very much about that. The consistency issue is a challenge. We have regions in different physiographic regions, different permitting issues, different linic and lodic issues, surface water issues, groundwater issues that come up. So it's one of those things that as a supervisor or manager, you have to continue to work on and continue to work with staff. We do have staff turnover, but we have operators change and permittees come and go. So you really do have to work with purpose to try and ensure that consistency is going forward. So those are some of the major items. So Stanford, can you hear me? I can't hear you.
There we go. Yeah, the platform was telling me that the host was not letting folks unmute themselves. So I was hitting the unmute button and it wouldn't cooperate. So if the host could free us up to mute and unmute as we go through this presentation, that would be terrific. Well, Danny, thank you for mentioning consistency. That is always a tricky item for the regulated community and folks in our audience. Consistency between regions, consistency within a region between regulators at a desk, consistency in time, that is historic, something that you may have gotten one interpretation a couple of years ago and then that changes for no apparent reason, et cetera. I'm glad that is something that personally that you're focusing on. That's terrific. Could you, Danny, talk a little bit about areas? So, again, you're on the job for 1 year. You've had an opportunity to, assess the landscape at the division. What areas do you feel like the division is quite strong? And then what are some other areas where you feel like improvement is warranted? And certainly every manager knows some areas of their agency where improvement's warranted, and so didn't mean to put you on the spot with that, but that's just a fact of being a manager.
No, I totally understand. That's a great question. So first of all, strengths and challenges is a big subject. So one of the challenges are, we have so many staff. We need to be smart about where we're spending our time. I mean, as well, there are facilities that need more assistance than others. So really spending time on some of the facilities that have compliance issues that need technical assistance and need help with understanding what is expected out of their permit and reporting and monitoring, focusing on those things to where we spend time on those facilities or permittees that are more challenged than others, because they're not all on the same playing field. So that's one of the things that I would offer. One of the challenges that we have just broadly, a lot of our wastewater treatment facilities have issues with inflow and infiltration and managing of residuals. Those are the I&I issues can be really a problem for process for operations at plants, and difficulties with solids management and SSOs, as well as can cause it's expensive to manage water that is coming into your plant that you don't need to have. So those are some of the issues. Residuals management, all the wastewater plants that we have, majors, minors, non-discharge, animal operation facilities, all those facilities, if they're working properly, they're going to generate solids. So that is something that all these facilities have in common that they need to work with. From a staffing standpoint, we just need to make certain we're spending time as much as we can to be, I talked about consistency, but we also have to be adaptive to be responsive to as much changes as we can. One of the, I want to talk about strengths though. One thing to talk about for North Carolina, we got an awesome state. We have like 10 million people in the state. Like 2 million people came here in the last 20 years. So we have a lot of infrastructure, a lot of demand on infrastructure, and we have tremendous resources. Mountains, we have these really broad streams and broad river valleys with cold water and loads of TSS, high dissolved oxygen in the water. And in the Piedmont, we've got streams coursing through spells of crystalline, slate belt, triassic soils, producing different stream bed substrate and habitats and big reservoirs. In the coastal plain, we have these brown water and black water streams and big gum swamps and cypress swamps and salt marshes and freshwater marshes, and the second largest estuary in the lower 48. Just tremendous. But we do have some resource issues. We have sediment problems and turbidity issues in streams. We do have dissolved oxygen and pH and algal blooms and issues related to eutrophication. And there's concerns about SAB and habitat suitability for commercial fisheries. So we have issues that we have to work on. And we have probably like 5.3 million people on centralized sewage and 36,000 miles of collection systems. We have like 5,500 public water supply systems. We have an enormous amount of infrastructure. We have concerns about storm resiliency and responding to hurricanes and unnamed storm events as well. So my point to this is we have a lot of challenges, but we have a lot of strengths. So and so I'm really much about being about all of those, the challenges and the strengths. So,
well, Danny, thanks for the reminder about the riches of natural resources we have in North Carolina. We are truly blessed, and thank you for your part in keeping water quality top of mind and protecting our surface water streams, et cetera. Wanted to give Jim Spangler an opportunity to put a couple questions to you as well, Danny. Didn't mean to be monopolizing your time. Go ahead, Jim.
Sure. And Danny brought up a great point that I think resonates with everybody on the call, and that is that the state of North Carolina is very diverse and it does have a plethora of resources that are just fantastic. So that's one of the reasons why the business community comes to North Carolina. It's not the only reason, but it's certainly one of those. Workers and homeowners and industry folks all want to be in a great place to live. So, there's kind of a tension there, Danny, and I'm wondering if you could comment on, what the business community can be doing to help the division with those specific challenges that you identified, and how you see the business community playing a role in compliance going forward.
Okay. So I guess a good answer would be, for the business community, you're going to encounter the need for permits or certifications or authorizations. So making certain that that going through that process, that you understand well what the conditions are and what's required. And if you have operators that are wastewater operators or consultants that are helping you with that, so the communication is good, so that you as the business owner understand what's expected. Oftentimes it's a much bigger lift than actually securing the approval or the authorization. That's actually, once you have it, there may be conditions or requirements that are coincident to that. And certainly one of the experience that I have is, you'll have a particular permit, and then you go to the next one, and there can be differences in the requirements or the site conditions that make one site very different than another, and that the challenges aren't the same in one site versus another. So I guess my broad response to that is, looking hard at, the regulatory tools that are there, and seeking assistance from not only the staff in the regional offices, but consultants or operators or other folks that can help affect compliance.
So when it comes to compliance, historically, the division has taken a fairly cooperative position when it comes to doing inspections and working through a compliance program with industry and with particular permittees. Do you see any changes in the process of compliance overall that will be occurring in the division over the next few years?
Not that jumps out to me. And one of the things, and I hate that was the initial delay. One of the points I was wanting to make earlier was, and our permitting program components. You know, we do have, you know, technical assistance and outreach, and there are inspectors that you can talk to, and also assistance that you can receive. There's a lot of times that we spend with permittees to talk through what the permit conditions are and what the monitoring expectations are, and how to affect compliance or be compliant. Also, there is reviews on the application, just initially ensuring that the project is appropriate and doing the reviews to make certain that what's being proposed meets, for example, minimum design or whatnot. And then even the regulatory component of it, you know, when we address violations or failure to monitor or failure to report or to provide notice, or there's a construction violation, whatever the issue is, you know, when we address those, what is happening is all those, the assistance, the outreach, the permitting review or application review, and the compliance all combine in concert to help affect compliance on a broad scale and programmatic level. So certainly, I would expect you know, the communication to be open with the business community and with the permittees and with the consultant community as well.
Maybe if we could, let's pivot to a specific topic for a little bit more information from Danny and what the division is doing. So let's pivot to PFAS and emerging contaminants. So you know, EPA has been very active in this space at the federal level with action plans and lots of memos and so forth. But there's still, you know, are no MCLs for PFAS under the Safe Drinking Water Act. EPA has not yet designated these substances as hazardous substances under CERCLA, but that's, you know, they're beginning that process. They have added a long list of PFAS chemicals to the toxic release inventory under EPGRA. Just in January, I think 172 substances were added to that list. There are their health advisories, of course, for PFOS and PFOA, and some groundwater cleanup recommendations, et cetera, at the federal level. Danny, could you kind of bring us up to date on where we are in North Carolina on PFAS regulation and so forth as it relates to water quality? We heard a little bit from Mike Abrazinskis about air quality, but if you could, bring us up to date on the water quality overlay.
Okay. Well, you're quite right. PFAS is an emerging compound or a compound of emerging concern. There's a lot of interest in the public on this issue, but right now, as far as standards for PFOA and PFOS, Gen X, or other PFOS, we do not have surface water standards. There is standards that are in place now. We just don't have those. We do have proposed for PFOA and PFOS a groundwater standard for, and that's at 70 nanograms per liter. So that is in process. So, one of, I guess, where we have what some of our initiatives have been lately we've been conducting sampling in Jordan Lake since 2018, and we've conducted a public water supply reservoir intake sampling in the News Basin, and this year we're getting ready to sample Yadkin PD, Lumber, and Broad water supply intakes. We should have 25 sites. We've been working through issues with Chemours, eliminated the process water outfall at 002. Through the consent order, we've been working through or required treatment works to intercept and reduce PFAS loading to the Cape Fear at an old outfall 002. And they're currently working towards separating stormwater from non-process area and the manufacturing, non-process water in the manufacturing area. So that's in process. We've done some sampling, and the Cape Fear is a primary focus on with our publicly owned treatment works, doing influent sampling with PFAS. I think 28 facilities have been sampled. We've sampled 8 industries that discharge directly to the Cape Fear, and we're this fall we've been working through trying to collect 6 100% domestic municipal discharging facilities with less than 1 MGD to also get some information on where the PFAS is coming from. Julie Gribb, the deputy director, she did a presentation for the Science Advisory Board in December, and that presentation is on the SAB's website. You may find some interest in that. It faces through a lot of that data. So, one of the, as far as one of the issues, and kind of maybe a path forward to emerging compounds more broadly is the need, and the focus on getting monitoring. We're trying, particularly in the Cape Fear River Basin, collecting samples and monitoring lakes and reservoirs. So having that surveillance is important. Also, we're going to have to keep up with sampling protocols and analysis techniques with emerging compounds. These issues are changing. Detection levels are moving. So there's education for staff and things that are coming along that we have to adjust to. Also, as a part of this approach, you need to have source identification and source investigation, kind of to understand the fate and transport where this material is and where it's coming and how it daylights in different locations, and provide that information to the PODWs and industries and the regulated community, and then focus on source reduction to get the material out of the loading removed from the basin. So those are, that's kind of what we've been doing, and the path forward I see is, you have to have some sort of sustained monitoring, source ID, identification, and a reduction approach. That's really where we are right now. I do know from public hearings and public meetings that we've had on different issues, as well as the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule from EPA and ongoing research. There is a lot of interest in emerging compounds from the public, and it's really an issue for the regulated community. It's just not an issue that's going to go away. So, thank you.
On Danny, on the source identification question, my recollection was maybe in 2019, the division required a series of industrial NPDES permit holders in the Cape Fear to conduct sampling. And so is your thought on source identification mean that might be repeated or broadened out further? What could the regulated community expect as far as requests from the division in that regard?
All right, so that's a good question. So and I was thinking more broadly than that. So with PFAS, there's use in wrappers for sandwiches, for nonstick issues. It's in cookware, as well as carpet and furniture. It's a kind of a repellent, prevents grease. There is use in AFFF foam aqueous film fighting. Aqueous film. Yeah. So the point I'm trying to make is that we observe PFAS and landfill leachate, which is, a point to this is it's in our environment, it's in our products. So also there may be sources that are daylighted from manufacturers or folks that are packaging the equipment, this material, or when it's used in areas where you use firefighting foam. So there could be areas where there is acute sources that daylight, and then that are there, and then there may be ways that material gets transported around as well through wastewater systems, or people putting waste into collection systems, or putting waste into landfills and others. So my point on source identification is a bigger question. I mean, it certainly has to do with publicly owned treatment works with industrial pretreatment programs, but the question's bigger than that.
Danny, I know we've got just a little bit of time left, and there've been a couple of questions that I want to make sure that we have you perhaps answer. One of those came in a little earlier, and when you were describing some of the challenges and some of the strengths that we have here at DEQ, and it was, I think, related to your discussion of water supply and water supply reservoirs in particular. The question is, what's the status of the state's long-term water storage resources in light of the state's projected growth? Do you have a view on that? Can you comment on that, please?
I do. We have a planning section that works with local governments and on their water supply plans. So there is a process from which to help local governments make certain they have those kinds of issues addressed. As far as a specific account of, do we have enough reservoirs? Is there another reservoir that needs to be constructed? If that's the question, I don't have an answer for that. But I do know that Linwood Pills Group works with a lot of these programs, and to ensure that they understand what their supplies are and what their needs are. But I don't have a more detailed answer or a particular account of a resource gap that we need to pursue right this second.
All right, fantastic.
Danny, there was also, we just have a couple more minutes. The conference has given us a little extra time based on our technical issues at the beginning. Right. There was a question regarding any expectation to limit or monitor PFAS in stormwater discharges, et cetera. Could you speak to that? I mean, to the extent that you are coordinating with the stormwater group in Demler?
Okay, so the Division of Energy, Mineral, and Land Resources is the division that oversees our stormwater programs. So right now, I'm not aware of any requirements to monitor PFAS in stormwater, though EPA has provided a work group recommendation to include phased-in monitoring and perhaps pollution control requirements for select stormwater facilities. These would be facilities that actually have this as an issue. That's their recommendation for permit writers to consider. This is from November of 2020. But as far as I know, I'm not aware of any permits that have that in them right now. And again, I'm not with that division. That would be something that Brian Wren's group or Lucas could better answer.
Right, and I think that EPA guidance that you mentioned, Danny, from November of 2020 also covered NPDES permits for POTWs and industrial discharges. And my recollection of that for the audience is that EPA work group recommendation generally for permits that EPA issues, and then I think that'll trickle down to then delegated programs at the state level, is for permit writers to consider monitoring requirements for those permits where PFAS might reasonably be expected to be in effluent, not just everywhere, but where it would reasonably be expected to be. And then also the monitoring requirements, I think, would phase in based on the development of reliable, multi-lab verified testing protocols, so that again, the testing and analysis of these compounds has been tricky from the beginning and continues to be. But that's something that I think folks in the audience who have NPDES permits for municipal facilities or for industrial discharges might see that going forward at renewal or otherwise for a facility that might be reasonably expected to have PFAS in effluent. Is that a fair statement, Danny?
I think so. It certainly is what's been communicated by EPA from their work group as far as the recommendation. So it's certainly possible that there could be monitoring requirements in permits going forward or in the future. That looks like the recommendation from EPA. Also, EPA has announced and finalized the effluent guidance program plan. This is an advance notice of some proposed rulemaking, and the idea is to collect data and information regarding PFAS manufacturers and industries. And the purpose is to determine if industrial sources warrant effluent guidelines to address PFAS. That was recently announced by EPA as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Danny, and thank you, Jim. We've been asked to go ahead and wrap our session up to allow for the Division of Waste Management discussion. But as I indicated earlier, Jim and Danny and I are going to move over to the conference lounge. And if anyone wants to join us over there to talk about the WOTUS rule or the new nationwide permits or anything else water quality related, there are a couple of residual questions in the Q&A that we didn't get a chance to speak to. Maybe we could talk about those first thing over in the lounge. But thank you both for your time and participation today.
Thank you.
Absolutely.